Good morning and welcome to A Sanctuary in the World. I am Reverend Toya Richards and I am coming to you this morning from actually my living room. I am coming to you this morning from my living room in St. Paul, Minnesota. St. Paul, Minnesota. A Sanctuary in the World is a space that I have created, a virtual space that I have created where I hope we can come together on a regular basis to reflect on the things happening out in the world, the things going on out in the milieu that we call the world, and how those things intersect with what we believe. It's a space, a virtual space that we'll be meeting in. So that we can unpack what it means to live out in the world and to do so up against the things that we value and the things that we hold true to ourselves. We'll be meeting in various sanctuaries, if you will, out in the world. Last week we met at Indian Mounds Park, and today we're meeting in my living room because Minnesota, like many other places, is under a stay-at-home mandate, and so we are being asked to shelter in place and shelter at home. This stay-at-home order is challenging for many of us who are used to going out, being out and about, but I want to share that it is especially hard for a population that does not have a place that they call home. There are many among us, many in the world, who don't have the luxury of having a living room like this one, or the space that you're in. They are vulnerable. They are people for whom, when we're asked to stay at home, they have to wonder, where is home? And so I just want to us to think a little bit about that as we think about the sanctuary out in the world. I want to share with you a particular place that is a special sanctuary out in the world. It's right here in St. Paul. It's called Safe Space. And Safe Space is an emergency shelter. It's an emergency homeless shelter that is operated by an agency called Model Cities of St. Paul. And Safe Space is open. It's primarily just for sleeping, and it's open from 10 p.m. to 9 a.m. the following morning. And on any given night, people line up outside of Safe Space, sometimes as early as 9 o'clock, trying to get a bed at Safe Space. And the shelter sleeps probably around 45 men and up to about 20 women. It's a referral shelter, so people have to have a referral either from another agency, Catholic Charities, or from the police or from Transit Police in order to stay there. So during this COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic, this population and many others like them are particularly vulnerable right now, because the places that they would normally go in and around their sleeping, the places that they would normally go, the public spaces where they would normally find refuge, are shut down. And so public transportation, the train is shut down, libraries are shut down, fast food restaurants are shut down. And so they are literally wandering, trying to find refuge and trying to find a place to be. So this virus has perhaps prompted me to really think about that population and others like them who don't have the luxury of choosing where they will go. And it's prompted me really to think about what shelter and refuge really looks like. What it really means to be sheltered, what it really means to find refuge, what it really means to have a home space. And so, I have been wrestling with that. I was already wrestling with it before the COVID pandemic, but I'm particularly diving deeper in my mind into this notion of refuge and safe space and home. It's prompted me to ask questions like, why are there so many barriers to affordable housing? Why are there so many hoops for people in terms of finding a place to live and a place to rest and a place to call home? It's prompted me to think about things like mental health and why in this country have we not been able to adequately serve those who have mental illness and to serve them, but also shelter them as they're being cared for. How in a country where we were able to find trillions of dollars to provide stimulus, have we not been able to, up to this point, adequately house all of the most vulnerable who need it out there? It's also prompted me to think about my own space, my own house, my own place of refuge, and to really turn the mirror on myself and ask, how much space is enough for one human being? What do I really need to have in this space? What are my needs versus my wants? And am I living in a space that is fair and just and equitable? These are questions that, for me, don't live in isolation. These are questions about the larger world and questions about my own life that don't live in isolation. They are questions that intersect with what I believe and with my faith. It's where faith, for me, meets life. And so I always have to think about, what is it that's happening in the world? And how does that connect with what I believe and what guides me? And so in doing so with that regard, I was drawn to, as I usually am, my textbook called the Bible. And I was drawn to the Psalms specifically. The Psalms are really a collection of about 150 favorite songs of ancient Israel that speak to every aspect of life. They were written for a specific time and place, an ancient time and place, but the Psalms are still living and breathing and relevant for today. And so when I was thinking about this notion of refuge and this notion of shelter and those who don't have it and those of us who do, and the equitability and justness around that, I was drawn to a particular psalm that I want to highlight and lift up today. Psalm 91, and I would invite you, I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I would invite you in your own time to read that whole chapter if you're able. I'm just going to read Psalm 91 verses 1 through 4 right now, because I think it will really highlight, at least it did for me, and spoke to me. So Psalm 91 verses 1 through 4, and I'm going to read it from the Common English Bible. Psalm 91. Living in the Most High's shelter, camping in the Almighty's shade. I say to the Lord, you are my refuge, my stronghold. You are my God, the one I trust. God will save you from the hunter's trap and from deadly sickness. God will protect you with his pinions. You'll find refuge under his wings. His faithfulness is a protective shield. And because I'm a bit of a Bible nerd, I like to read different translations, and so I'm also going to read it to you from the New International Version. Psalm 91, verses 1 through 4. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will rest in the shadow of the Almighty. I will say of the Lord, he is my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. Surely he will save you from the fowler's snare and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his feathers, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness will be your shield and your rampart. I really, really like that that passage, because it really tells me that there is hope. There is hope. There is an energy. There is a power. There is a force that is at play out in the world that is in fact protecting and covering and offering refuge. And so for me, as I'm confused about all of the questions that I just raised, as I'm looking at what is my part in that process, I find hope in that text that she who dwells in the secret place of the Most High shall abide under the shadow of the Almighty. And so, what I also know, and what I want to leave with you is that it's not just about me. It's not just about me being finding refuge and me finding comfort and me knowing that if I choose to believe and to trust that I'm okay, that I'll be covered. It's about me also ensuring that everyone else knows that too. And so that's the active agency. That's the active part for me in this process. It's about what's available, but it's about what I do with that as well. And so it's necessary for me in my life to take that knowledge and to share it so that the people at Safe Space and the people in New York and the people in LA and my neighbors and everybody that I encounter, that all of God's creation understands that that's available to them too. I know for me that I've got to stay on the front lines. I've got to be working to dismantle systems that are unjust, systems that don't provide adequate shelter, adequate refuge for those that need it the most. I've got to be doing that both for myself, but for the collective we that is this world. That's a lot for you to think about. It's a lot that I've put out there. It's a weighty issue though, and it's an issue that I hope as we leave from this space you will think about and that you will meditate on. And I challenge you, I encourage you, I invite you to really explore how this particular issue of refuge and home and shelter connects and intersects with what you believe and what guides you the most. That's my prayer for you today, and that is my hope for you today. I want to leave you with a poem. It's one of my favorite poems. It's a poem by Maya Angelou, and it's called On the Pulse of Morning. A rock, a river, a tree, host to species long since departed, marked the mastodon, the dinosaur who left dried tokens of their sojourn here on our planet floor. Any broad alarm of their hastening doom is lost in the gloom of dust and ages. But today the rock cries out to us clearly, forcefully, "Come, you may stand upon my back and face your distant destiny. But seek no haven in my shadow. I will give you no hiding place down here. You, created only a little lower than the angels, have crouched too long in the bruising darkness, have lain too long face down in ignorance, your mouths spilling words armed for slaughter. The rock cries out to us today, you may stand upon me, but do not hide your face." That's just an excerpt from that poem. I'm actually going to stop there because I want to invite you to look it up yourself and read the rest in your own time. My friends, if you like what you've heard, if you want to continue to walk with me on this journey, I invite you to go to my website, www.gracemultimedia.org. You may read more and learn more and hear more. There's also a space there to donate if you like to keep this ministry going. Thank you for journeying with me today, and I invite you back to the next time we join together in a sanctuary in the world.